Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever been scrolling, maybe social media, maybe a website, and just felt pulled towards one thing?
While other things just sort of vanish.
Exactly. Like, why that image or that button? Well, it turns out your brain is making these super quick, often unconscious calls based on visual stuff.
Yeah, and these calls, they really shape what grabs your attention, what you decide to trust, even what you click on next.
So today we're doing a deep dive into some pretty fascinating research. We're looking at studies from journals like Tourism Management, Computers and Human Behavior
Mm,
that show how things like images, text, color, even button shapes are subtly working on us online. It taps into some deep psychology.
really does. And what's eye-opening, I think, is how specific and measurable these effects are. Like, let's start with social media.
Okay.
There's this one study, it used eye tracking, looking at posts about art exhibitions, visitor-generated content,
Like when someone posts their picture from a museum visit.
precisely. And they found something really interesting about selfies. When the person is actually in the photo with the art.
Ah, okay. What about them?
Well, those posts,
Yeah.
they grabbed way more attention. Participants spent significantly longer looking at the whole post cover if there was a selfie.
How much longer? Are we talking milliseconds?
We are, but it adds up. It was about 437 milliseconds with a selfie versus around 400 without.
Okay, wait. 400 milliseconds might sound tiny, but online, that's absolutely the gap between someone noticing your post and just scrolling right past.
Exactly. So putting your visual self out there, it literally helps, stop the scroll. It connects to self-presentation, identity.
Right, that makes sense. But does the selfie distract from the actual art in the post?
And that's the surprising part. According to the eye-tracking heat maps, not really. The selfie grabbed attention for the whole post, but didn't seem to pull focus away from the artwork itself. People looked at both.
Huh, interesting.
I get this. The same study looked at titles, emotional titles, like breathtaking masterpieces.
Versus something dry like exhibition details.
Exactly. The emotional titles resulted in significantly more attention, more fixations, specifically on the artwork area, like 14 fixation counts versus just over 10 for the informational ones.
Wow, so it's the combination then, personal photos and emotional language guiding where you look.
It seems that way. They work together.
Okay, that covers grabbing attention, like that initial hook. But you mentioned these sources go deeper, like beyond what we consciously notice.
Right. And that leads to a big question.
Yeah.
What's influencing you maybe beneath the surface? This is where neuroimaging research comes in, looking at our unconscious reactions.
Brain scans for website design.
Yep. One study used fNIRS, that's a type of brain scanning, along with the usual self-reports, to see how website colors and shapes affect us.
And what did the brain scans pick up that maybe people didn't even, say they felt?
Quite a bit, actually. We already know from other research that color is huge for product evaluation. Some studies say like 60% to 90% of our first impression is based on color alone.
60 to 90%. That's massive.
It is. And in this particular study, people didn't always report feeling differently about, say, a blue website versus a red one. But their brains, they reacted very differently.
How so? What did the brain activity show?
Red websites triggered higher activation in parts of the brain, like the left prefrontal cortex, linked with more cognitive effort, maybe even connected to our old evolutionary threat associations with red.
Like a subconscious pay attention, this might be important or dangerous as signal.
Kind of, yeah. Meanwhile, blue websites showed lower activation in that same area. The researchers called it cognitive relief. Like the brain processes blue more easily, perhaps feels safer.
So wait, our ancient wiring red equals danger, blue equals calm that's still kicking in when we're just looking at a web page, even if we don't feel it consciously?
The brain data strongly suggests it is. It's pretty incredible. And it wasn't just color. Shapes mattered too.
Okay, like button shapes, rounded versus sharp.
Exactly. Rounded shapes led to higher activation in brain areas tied to positive perception, preference, feeling good about something, wanting to approach it.
Ah, the evolutionary psychology idea again. Like rounded things, maybe fruit, are safe, but sharp things could be thorns or teeth.
That's the theory it supports, yes.
Mm-hmm.
The neural data consistently showed rounded shapes felt more approachable, more positive, even when people didn't explicitly state that preference in surveys.
So pulling this all together, what's the big takeaway for you listening right now?
Well, whether you're scrolling Instagram or deciding where to click on a website, these visual elements are doing more than just looking nice.
Right. They're not just decoration. That selfie that catches your eye, the emotional headline, the color of a button, the shape of it. These things are tapping into some really deep-seated psychological responses.
Sometimes consciously, sometimes completely unconsciously. They're influencing your attention, how much you trust something, and maybe even what you do next.
So your whole online experience is being subtly shaped in ways you probably don't even realize your brain is reacting to. It's all about this rapid, non-conscious processing.
Based on instincts and learned associations, yeah.
Which leads to a really interesting thought, doesn't it? If basic things like colors and shapes are pushing these ancient buttons in our brains to guide our modern digital lives,
Uh-huh.
what other seemingly tiny, insignificant design details online might be manipulating our primal responses right now completely without us knowing?